So this is my 7th video, and for my 7th video, I want to talk about God's perfect number, which is the number 7. So God works in sevens, and let me explain what I mean by that. So when God created the world, He made it in 7 days. He worked for 6 and rested on the 7th. When He brought the Jewish people in and gave them the law, He said, you will work 6 days and you will rest on the 7th. That'll be a holy Sabbath where you do no work and you think about God and rest. All right, so let's expand beyond that. Beyond the Sabbath, God had it where the Jewish people worked 6 years, and on the 7th year, they didn't plant anything. They let the ground rest. And he would always promise them that He would give them double the produce of the 6th year to get them through the 7th year, and he did that. So even the years He broke up into sevens, and then He went another step. Every time there was 7 years times the number 7, so 49 years. The 49th year to the 50th year was a Jubilee year. Jubilee year is where anyone who sold their land off to someone else would get their land back. So let's say somebody from Judah sold his land to a Benjamite. The Benjamite would have to return the land to the family or the same person who was from Judah. That way nobody would be poor in Israel for all their life. Also, if you had slaves who were Israelites, they sold themselves into slavery to cover their debts, they would be freed on the Jubilee year, and He forgave all debts on the Jubilee year because God didn't want the Jewish people owning each other. So He said every 50 years, it's a clean slate for them. So 7 is very important to God. That's His perfect timetable that He does things in. Okay. So even the tribulation is 7 years long. Now, here's something a lot of people don't really get about the tribulation. The tribulation affects the whole world, and it's really terrible. But the tribulation is specifically aimed at the Jewish people. The Jewish people, always when they are in times of great distress, will turn to God and be faithful. When they are in times of great prosperity, they turn away from God. This repeats through the Bible so many times you can't even count it practically. So, again, the tribulation is focused on the Israelites and getting them to turn back to God and to become faithful and learn about the Messiah. Okay, so the tribulation is even 7 years because it's part of God's plan. Now, after the tribulation, the world does not end. After the tribulation, there is the return of Jesus, who rules over the entire world for 1,000 years. It's called the millennial reign. Okay? So people suddenly realize, wait a second, there's 1,000 years after the tribulation. And hold on, I got to read this one thing real quick. So this is from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. But do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. Now, this is also mentioned, he probably got this from Psalm 90, but to God, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. Well, the people who were looking at the millennial reign in recent times suddenly had a light bulb go off in their heads, and they said, wait a second, there's 1,000 years of peace. And if we read the Bible, where are we at in the biblical timeline? We're coming up on year 6,000. That would mean 6,000 years not of peace, or humankind messing up, and 1,000 years of peace and rest under Jesus. So if you go from today back to Jesus' time, you're almost at 2,000 years, okay? I think in 2030, it'll be 2,000 years since His resurrection. If you go from the resurrection, from Jesus' time backwards 2,000 years, you're at Abraham. Abraham was the man that God made the covenant with to have his descendants become the Israelites. Okay, if you go from Abraham back to the beginning of creation and Adam and Eve, that's another 2,000 years. That's subtracting off the ages of the people in Genesis. You can track it back to about 2,000 years before. So we got Adam to Abraham, 2,000 years. Abraham to Jesus, which was the Israelites. Jesus to now, which is the church. And then we have a small section, 1,000 years, with Jesus here running things in peace and rest. So from a prophetic plan and from God's planning, it makes a lot of sense that we would be on this 1,000 years, or 1 week of 1,000 years. Again, this is something that if you go and search it up, all the theologians and evangelists are kind of on board with this idea. Also, since Israel's come back in the land and we're seeing the signs of the time that we're in the latter days or the last of the 6,000 year cycle, then this totally makes a lot of sense from just a mathematical point of view and how God operates. So nevertheless, this video has been on basically the number 7, which is God's plan for perfection, and we're at the end of 6, about to go into the 7th. So thank you all for watching. If you will click the subscribe and you hit the little bell icon if you want to know next time one of these came up. And I'm trying very hard to end this video within 7 minutes. So God bless you all, and peace be upon you.